Welcome into Northside Territory, Foul Territory Network's Cubs podcast. I'm Sahadev Sharma with my partner Patrick Mooney. We're your Cubs beat writers over at The Athletic. Patrick, we have a starting pitcher edition for the Cubs. Early, what was it, Monday morning? I don't know what day we're on now. Early Monday morning, it was reported that Matthew Boyd had signed with the Cubs 2 years, $29 million. I think we kind of reported upper middle tier. Maybe this is not upper middle tier. This is more lower middle tier.
Middle, yeah.
Middle tier. And this is certainly a quality piece in the sense that Matthew Boyd has upside. Matthew Boyd doesn't have a ton of innings on his arm, but that is because of injury. But when he has pitched, he's pitched well, especially lately. I don't think this is kind of when we started talking about free agency, these are the types of moves I kind of expected, right? Like solid move, but nothing that's going to blow the fan base away, whether it's Matthew Boyd or even a little better, more established pitcher like Nathan Eovaldi. These types of names just aren't going to blow the fan base away, but they have a chance of paying off. And I think what I come away from this is the Cubs have a lot of starting pitching depth right now, even if they don't have, even if they didn't add like innings certainty.
Yeah, look, I mean, everyone loves Kyle Hendricks, but as a fifth starter this past year, he was not reliable. He was not productive enough. I think if you shore up this area of your team, you're going to get better, and that's the whole point, right? Like it's not a huge headliner. I think this is where kind of teams are going, and it's kind of interesting that Scott Boras reps a bunch of these pitchers who have all signed kind of around Thanksgiving before the winter meetings. And I think for teams, this is kind of the sweet spot, right? Of like, you don't have to go too long in terms of years. You pay a little more on a annual basis, but it doesn't kind of crush your budget. There's still some, room to do other stuff. And I think you have Craig Counsell running your team who is very thoughtful about rest and recovery and how he deploys his out getters. I was told Boyd is a fan of Counsell and that the Cubs did their usual sort of sales pitch to him. Spring training in Arizona, playing in Chicago, very attractive to him. And I was actually there for his first game back in quite some time with the Guardians, and he shut down the Cubs offense in Cleveland that night. That was, I think, kind of a rough 3-game sweep in the middle of August. And yeah, I think I do like the idea of upside though, right? Like there is some risk, some uncertainty to it, but I don't know if this guy clicks, it could be a really interesting piece.
Right. I mean, you could be getting a guy on a late career upswing, right? I mean, it's like getting John Lackey before where did they sign him from? They signed him from Boston. So it would be those years in Boston, right? That Lackey had.
From the Cardinals, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Oh, was it Cardinals?
Boston, okay. St. Louis, Chicago, I think.
Yeah, okay. So that near the end of his career, but right after TJ is when he like kind of had this renaissance, John Lackey renaissance, right? So it'd be like this. It's before he gets super expensive. It's before, I mean, this is expensive, right? For maybe what was projected. But I think near the end of the season, I started reading more about like, oh wait, Matthew Boyd's actually going to get a little bit more than what was expected. And, I think people do see upside here. He's got 2 quality breaking balls. He doesn't throw hard. I saw someone post on Twitter. I think Jameson Taillon has the hardest average fastball in the rotation currently. If it's Assad as the 5th starter, granted, there's 3 lefties in there, so automatically you're down a couple ticks, right? Because the average lefty throws doesn't throw as hard as the average righty. But that's just I think that's interesting that Matthew Boyd's like a tick below, like not even a full tick behind Tyone. They don't have these overpowering starters at the moment, and but he gets outs. He does strike guys out. At least recently, he's been striking guys out. I wonder if you can get like 2 really quality years out of him. I think the deal has a mutual option. We'll see how this plays out. He's in his 30s. It's not like he's young and upcoming, but sometimes post injury, when you're fully healthy and you had the major surgery, you have a couple years of a renaissance. We'll see if it's that or if he's, you know, snake bitten and continues to get injured, and this is just a sunk cost. We'll see which direction it goes. I do think he has some upside, and that this is a potentially impactful addition. Like he could certainly have the type of season that Jameson Tyone had, right? He could certainly give them those types of quality innings, and I think that's what they're looking for. I remember having a talk with someone, maybe it was in October, about the need for starting pitching, and I was like, how much would you like to get someone that kind of guarantees you 160 innings? And he's like, yeah, that'd be great. It's hard to find that type of consistency and also quality. Like it's not easy to get those guys at a reasonable cost. Clearly they're being a little cautious with how aggressive they're going to be spending, but I do think it's a good addition for that tier of pitcher, and they needed someone to kind of solidify things. And like you said, it's an upgrade over Kyle Hendricks. As much as we respect Kyle Hendricks, just wasn't giving them enough. And I think if he's healthy, it's an upgrade.
Boyd also comes with an excellent reputation as a clubhouse guy, someone who I imagine would click with Tyone and be willing to kind of mentor some of these younger pitchers. I mean, he was good enough to start in the ALCS, which is interesting. I'm also curious, like, do we think he's going to make 30 starts next year? Maybe not, but from that slot, can you get 30 out of Boyd and Ben Brown and Hayden Wisniewski? Like, I do think they're building a pretty deep and versatile staff. I mean, we'll see what they do with the bullpen, right? Like, we'll never know about the bullpen until maybe July. But
right.
I think, we saw the graphics, we wrote it in our story, like that starting 5 you can roll out with another kind of your next 5 at Iowa or adjacent in the bullpen. It looks pretty good. And, Max Fried would have come with durability questions. Corbin Burns, we reported a while ago, was just not a pitcher, not a price point that they were willing to pursue. They weren't in love with Blake Snell in terms of some durability, consistency kind of concerns. And like, this is kind of the going rate. Like if you're not just developing great starting pitches all the time on your own, you have to go either trade for it or pay for it. And I think we've seen, as we wrote, this market is kind of heating up, and they didn't wait around until the middle of January to do something about it.
Right. And that brings about the next logical question that I think fans were almost immediately asking. I think I was wondering when I woke up and saw this news, is this it for starting pitchers for the Cubs? I asked around, and it doesn't seem like they're going to be super aggressive when it comes to adding specifically another starting pitcher. They have depth. You name those names. There's also Brandon Birdsell, Cade Horton. We're probably missing someone, right?
Jordan Wicks,
Ben Brown, Hayden Wisniewski, Brandon Birdsell, Cade Horton. There's probably one more. I mean, if you want to include Nate Pearson as a potential starter,
multi-inning guy,
we'll see how they build him up in the offseason. So, this is they like their depth. It's a strength, right? So I don't think they're going to go crazy and go after that upper middle class tier that we were talking about of Evaldi and Kikuchi's now gone. Who was the other name? Jack Flaherty is probably like the upper class right now. The way this market is playing out, it's going to be it's going to be hard to add someone via free agency that's a certainty to the rotation, right? But I do think they are looking to improve the team in any way that they can. So is the focus starting pitching? I don't think so. I don't think that's where they're zeroing in on. I do think that we could see another starting pitcher added if the opportunity arises, and that it sounds like they are aggressively exploring ways to get better. But not just one avenue, not just like we have to add a starting pitcher and aggressive with that. It's just they're being creative, they're thinking about different ways, and they're finding they're exploring any avenue they can.
Solving for wins, as our guy Craig Counsell would say. Look forward to hearing his thoughts at the winter meetings next week. But I guess
that Matthew Boyd is an out-getter.
Yes, exactly. I mean, I think when you talk about avenues, the trade market has to be one of those possibilities, right?
Yeah, I think so. And we can just get to, the next question, which is what's next. And I think trade avenues are like something we're going to have to dig into and that we're going to hear a lot of rumors about. We said it, right? A trade has to come this winter. It really feels like a trade winter. It happened last winter too, like that was probably one of the bigger moves, right? I think we're looking at we're getting ready to see a bigger trade. If there's a big move, if there's a big addition, I think that's where it's coming from.
Yeah, I think trading Cody Bellinger is less of a thought exercise now and more of an active possibility. Like, I guess everything is sort of 50-50, right? It'll happen or it doesn't. But I do think the more this has gone on in terms of what we're hearing, what our colleagues are hearing, what our competitors are hearing of just like, so they're looking to get rid of Bellinger, but that's a huge chunk of financial flexibility that I think they'd like to get back in some way. The problem is obviously this is a front office that's under a lot of pressure next year. They have to win. So you can't be getting back some A-ball prospects and then hoping you hit all your free agent targets with that leftover money. Who's going to absorb all that money or a significant portion of that money? That is also unclear. Of course, the Yankees have had interest in Bellinger in the past. I think we could look to some of the teams that don't sign Juan Soto, and some of them have shown interest in Bellinger in the past, such as the Toronto Blue Jays. But I do think last winter is instructive. You're right, Sahadev, in terms of who saw the Michael Busch trade coming. The Paredes trade, while it did not work out exactly as the Cubs hoped, was like a different sort of style of trading that we had not seen in a while.
Even so
Pearson, exactly. Yeah. I mean, so there is kind of a track record now of what they, could look to do. And I do think since the budget is not unlimited, because they have stocked up on a lot of guys like Boyd, kind of giving them more annually and maybe an extra year, but not super long-term or not absolute top of the market. All those pieces have now stacked up to where I think we were talking about this off the air. I think maybe Fangraphs or Roster Resource has them around maybe $200 million in commitments for next year.
Yeah. I believe I just saw 201 million, according to Roster Resource for next year, luxury tax. So that would be $40 million under the luxury tax threshold. You don't go into the season. So let's say they want to be under this year. We're not certain about that, right? That's just kind of where we're at.
I think that's probably a good bet, right?
Yeah. So let's say that
they're take
aiming
the under on Cubs payroll.
Let's say they're aiming for 240. That's not where they're going to start the season. They don't want to do that. They want to have some cushion to add at the deadline if they're competitive. And so that puts them, this is what we were talking about a few episodes ago. Why do they need to move Cody Bellinger? They have all this room. They have 30 million left right now, right? Essentially, let's say if they want to keep like a $10 million cushion to add at the deadline, let's say 35 million. That's why, like, they'd be done then if they signed Corbin Burns. They'd be over if they signed Juan Soto. Again, I'm not saying that they should have these restrictions. I'm not saying like good for them that they're being smart with their money. I'm just saying these are the realities that they face. That this is what ownership is saying, and this is what they're working with. So it goes quickly. Even like someone like Anthony Santander, like that would take up majority of your budget right now, right? So they have to consider that, and they have to figure out ways to be more flexible. And maybe I think this is where trades outside of Cody Bellinger come into play. Are they looking to move someone like Jordan Wicks aggressively? I don't think so. But if they can find a deal where they get someone that's better, that wins in, wins out, right? Like how many conversations have we had with like front office people where it's like, do you like this guy? Well, is he an upgrade over, like, if he's 2.7 wins and our guy is 2.2 wins, we like this guy.
Yeah.
It's a very simple process in their minds sometimes when it comes to that. Like, what does he bring more value to our team? Like, how much are you paying him and how many wins does he bring you? Like these are the things that go through their minds. It's not always like, well, we need position X. It's no, like, how do we upgrade in any area possible? And I think that's where what they're looking at right now, a more holistic approach to team building. And I think it's frustrating sometimes to hear that, because you want to hear sexy names and big free agents. But I think the reality is, like, if they end up winning games and find a way to do that, then fans won't complain. So, get your complaining out in the offseason if it leads to wins in the regular season, I guess, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm also wondering too, like, Cody Bellinger is not a superstar. Certainly not this budding superstar he was at the beginning of his career. But he's like a good player.
Right.
And it's probably only for 1 year. And like, I don't know, 1 year of that and then kind of pivoting off of that versus 5 years for Santander. I don't know, what, 6 years? Like to get an impactful middle of the order player who can play up the middle and play various positions around the field, it's hard to find, and it usually costs you a ton if you don't develop it yourself. And so I have a hard time in theory, I get it. Sure, trade Cody Bellinger and do all these amazing things, but like then the reality of the season hits and someone's oblique hurts and someone's hamstring hurts, and this player isn't doing what he did last year. Like, I think it's a nice insurance policy to have, but you're right about the kind of range of trades we're talking about here. When you have a front office that doesn't think anyone's untouchable, certainly limited by all the no trade clauses they gave out, but I don't know, that cluster of prospects kind of around the AAA Iowa border should probably get rid of some of those, right? Like, you probably turn those in for major league pieces, and you could probably lump Wicks in that group as well.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. I think, you don't want to dump anyone. Like, James Triantos is a good prospect. Does he have a path to the major leagues with the Cubs, right? So you have to balance those two things of he's really good and talented and has some upside and it seems like he's developing in various areas in a positive fashion and you don't want to, but do you really see him as a future piece to this team? But that doesn't mean you just give him away. Like you have to find the right trade and make sure you're getting good value for him. You don't want to undervalue your own prospects and then suddenly now 5 years down the line it's people are complaining that you traded this guy, right? So
we would never do that. We would never bring up a trade that went
wrong. So I'm curious to see how, like, I think the more we talk to people, the more we get closer to the winter meetings, the more we get closer to Juan Soto signing, the more we're hearing things about Cody Bellinger, right? And I agree with you. You don't just move. Like, what are the following moves? What else happens? How do you build? What does this roster look like when we're talking after the, as we're entering spring training, whatever it may be? How different does this roster look? And what are the dominoes that fell after Cody Bellinger was moved? If this happens, if he's moved, what happens after that? I think those are the questions you and I are going to like be faced with and kind of are going to try and understand over the next 10 days. We leave for the winter meetings in less than a week. And I think that may be, at least from our perspective, from Cubs coverage, one of our biggest questions that we need answers to, right? As far as like it kind of sets up everything. Like if you're moving him, and it seems like that's, if they're being aggressive about anything right now, that may be it, right? Once Juan Soto is signed, then like what's next? How do you improve the team? Because just getting rid of him certainly doesn't improve the team, right? Where we're talking about wins, adding wins, taking away wins, runs, all those things.
Wins in, wins out. I like
that. Yeah. So I literally had a conversation with someone about that. And I was like, oh God, I don't want to have to describe it like that, but I guess this is how it works. So I do think that is the biggest domino. And if until we have clarity there, it's really hard to figure out what direction they go. And I'm curious to see how creative they can get. Like, what is this move? What is, because I want to give them the benefit of the doubt. Not that they've earned it, but at least with the results on the field the last 5 years. But when you keep bringing it up and it keeps reminding me, like, Cody Bellinger's a good player. Players get hurt. He's versatile. Anybody gets hurt, he'd be like, any of that 3 outfielders or Michael Busch or DH gets hurt, there's Cody Bellinger in to help the team and improve the team in some facets, right? You don't take this huge downgrade. Now what? Now what happens if he's gone, right? And you're hit with injuries. So I think it's a fascinating question and something that we'll hopefully get an answer to in the next month.
Yeah, our colleague Derek Lewandowski had me on his Pinstripes Territory show to talk about Bellinger. And I forget his exact phrasing. I didn't totally steal his line, but he said something like, you know what? I like good baseball players. Like, call me crazy. He said something like that. And I thought that was a good way to think about it, because part of it with the Yankees, we don't follow them every day, but watching the World Series, reading the coverage, it was this idea of, a lack of fundamentals, breakdowns in the field, on the bases, an approach that was not, that lacked certain situational awareness. I do think Cody Bellinger brings a lot of those things to the table. Now, I don't know if that means it's worth $30-something million next season, or not saying you give him a long-term mega deal, but as a guy playing for his next contract, I think it makes a lot of sense to have a guy like that who's well-rounded, who's well-liked, who's highly motivated, and has a ton of playoff experience. So whether it's Chicago, New York, or somewhere else, I just feel like until he's traded or not. I think this is going to be something we're going to be dealing with kind of until we get to Mesa.
Right. And if it's New York, I mean, that's the type of place where he'd feast offensively. If he's pulling the ball in the air, he's going to opt out of that contract. Like he's going to have, as long as he's healthy, like he'll be fine. Right.
For sure.
All right, Patrick, I think that's it for this episode. Let's make sure to let the we'll be back later this week with a special guest, right?
Yes.
We have a guest coming up on Thursday, I believe. Thanks so much for listening. Make sure to rate and review and subscribe to the YouTube channel. We appreciate all of you listening and subscribing to The Athletic, where Patrick and I will be covering the Cubs all offseason long and trying to figure out what direction this team is going and what moves they're going to be making. Thanks so much for listening, everyone.